what helped me a lot in my path of just self-help, as silly and like blanket as that is, I realize that things are temporary. Like even the most blissful, euphoric feelings, like those are temporary because something will knock me into something else, into another realm. And then the deep, dark despair realms, those are temporary too. Yeah. And I think that really helped me because it almost felt like when I was in my euphoric space that I wanted it to last forever. And then when I was in my deep, dark despair space, like the more I fought it, the more it would like continue, and I would feel suffocated by it, like almost like, how come I can't get to that euphoric place, because that's where I want to be forever, and I'm stuck down here in this deep dark dwelling, and it's embarrassing, and it's I'm ashamed of it, and it's ugly, and I feel that people can tell and sense and know that I don't have it together. And the more that I would just like unravel on myself, I would just like be in it. And so I also had to like teach myself to do the counterintuitive thing, which is like to get out, to change my scenery, to go talk to somebody, to do the thing that seems like, oh my gosh, that's like the last thing I want to do. I like realized that if I did it, that little critic inside my mind would like dissipate, like the moment I started.
Hello, patrons, and welcome to another episode of the Getting to Know Us podcast, video, awesome fusion thing that we have created just for you patrons because we are so grateful for all of your support. So I'm talking today with Julia Bennett. Yes. Thank you so much for being here, Julia.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we've filmed, I don't know, somewhere between 10 and 20 yoga videos?
Yes.
Maybe more, I don't know.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how you first got interested in yoga?
Sure. So I think that with yoga, it's one of those things that it's out there and people hear about it and they need to have like this personal connection to it. And for me, it didn't happen until I was injured from playing soccer in college that forced me to slow down and do the very counterintuitive thing for me, which is to take deep breaths and to be with myself and to not be overstimulated. So it was a long time coming, I think. I was 24 at the time, and I was 21 at the time. And then when I was practicing, I fell in love with it because something shifted mentally for me that I don't think, I mean, when I played sports, it would sometimes happen, but with yoga, it was like every time I came to my mat, it was like this ritualistic thing of emptying my mind and this self-critique and this place of expectation. So all in all, after college, I really got into it, and now here I am, oh my gosh, 10 years later, I feel like, and I'm still a big advocate for yoga.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny because knowing you now, you, to me, like really embody all of those aspects of yoga that you were just mentioning, you know, breathing deeply, being really calm. You just have this like such a sweet, open-hearted demeanor. Oh, wow. So it's kind of funny that what you were just saying is, you know, it wasn't until you got into yoga and it was really different for you at that time to slow down and breathe deeply and all those things. So it's just really funny for me to think about, you know, what you were like before you started doing yoga, and that you do have this like athletic, probably kind of competitive side from having played sports for so long.
Yes, I think it's funny, like just thinking about iterations of your own self and other people. I was very competitive. I had an older brother, 8 years older than myself. I still do. Sorry. I still have an older brother who, when I was growing up, he was in sports, and I always wanted to prove to my parents and to him and to my friends and everyone around me that I could keep up. And I think there's always been this softness of trying to be gentle and kind to the world and to others and to myself that I really never listened to until I was given the opportunity to. And so when I started doing yoga, I felt that there was all this space and all these people that I knew were out there, but I could never really connect to. And then when I connected to them, I was like, oh, they're just mirroring a lot of myself. And I really found it to be safe and wonderful. And then from there, it kind of is like life. There were variations of people that I may not have agreed with or do not align with. And then I had to ask myself, I think a lot of people in religion do this too, in politics and every big social circle. They have to ask themselves what bits and pieces do they want to apply to their life, and not to blanket the whole thing of being like, well, I don't like it because these people aren't representing it right. It's like your opportunity then to find people that are more in alignment with you. And so that was just like my process. And then when I was 27-ish, like in 2014, I got my yoga teacher training.
Okay.
And that was a big pull for me from mere curiosity of expanding my knowledge of yoga. I had no intention of teaching, actually, and I think that really played at my self-worth and my value of how I didn't want to be the teacher that someone didn't align with. Like, I wanted to please everybody. I wanted everyone to be like, oh, she has all this knowledge, and then at the same time I didn't want to be seen as their guru. So it was like this really kind of conflicting point, but I just dove right into it, and I really loved the experience.
Yeah, and I think what it speaks to is that, you know, every single one of us is so unique, and we all kind of have, you know, those different things that we resonate with, or different people that we resonate with, you know, so from the perspective that, you know, internally you were thinking, you know, how can I expect myself to be able to teach all these people and be what they need right now is kind of an impossible thing anyways, because there's no way to be everything that everyone needs. You know, everyone's coming in. Some people, maybe they're just concerned with their physical body and getting in shape or losing weight or something. Maybe the people, you know, some of the people that come to class are there for the more like stress relieving, emotional, heart opening benefits. So just being yourself, and this is kind of something we were talking about before we started rolling, you know, like just being really true to yourself kind of is the best way to serve everyone.
Yes, and I would say, and this happens to me a lot, sometimes I really do question who I am and what I'm doing and what's it for. And I know that in 2014, like the peak of my 27th year, like there's this thing called Saturn return where it takes Saturn 27 years to circle the sun. And that's really a pivotal time for humans, and in the space that they're evaluating what has been kind of given to them, whether it be expectations or programming or what they think they need to be versus who they feel like they are becoming. And it's this constant like back and forth, kind of like this pendulum. And so when I was 27, I was very much like, I don't agree with society. I don't agree with power dynamics and politics. And I just think that humans need to revert back to this essential tribalism of being in a small colonial group and everybody having a role and a purpose and letting it be like this collective. And then like having been raised in the Midwest with these expectations of having a good education, getting married, having kids, and then asking myself, is that really what I want at 27? Then I started doing yoga and feeling that there were other outlets of mastering the mind and really not feeling like you have all this time in the world to do whatever. It's like really finding the intentionality to it. Then I like somehow came back to the middle balance ground of it. So like that's what I think yoga is. Yoga is, it doesn't matter how you come to the mat or how you get introduced to it or what your reasons are, but hopefully you derive kind of the main missions that everyone derives from it, which is it's your life. You can dictate what you want to do, but hopefully you find the bottom of your bottom of being like, this is the worst I've ever been in, so that you at least know what it is. And then the most euphoric space that you can navigate in between. So yeah, I did that a lot. And now it's funny, I'm married and kids are definitely something that we're contemplating and talking about, but at least it's a dialogue and it's a thought. It's not like I have to do this because someone told me I have to. It's like owning the decisions that you make. So yoga to me is a sense of accountability and empowerment, because you are forced to sit with yourself and to be like, where do I end and someone else begin? Or where did all these people that have influenced me end and I begin? So yes, that's how I view it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's such an interesting thing to point out, because clearly we're all a, just kind of melting glob of who we are, just, what we were born as, the things that are maybe like intrinsic to us, and then like the nature and the nurture. So the impacts that we received from our family, from our culture, the social pressures and expectations. And I think for everyone, we're all kind of in that like navigating mode or whatever of trying to figure out, okay, well, what's me and what's everyone else's expectations? Right. And then asking a question like, what does it take to truly be happy? What does it take to truly feel contented and fulfilled? Maybe not necessarily knowing the exact navigation and the exact proportions of what you are, but just being aware. Right. That like sometimes when you have a feeling or an emotional reaction or whatever, it's, a result of that like programming and social expectations or social cues or whatever. And you just, by having that awareness that you have those influences on you or whatever, you are able to just, I think, own it a little bit more, own those emotional reactions that you have or those certain, feelings that you have about a certain thing. Taking yoga as an example, I think a lot of people, maybe they think about yoga and they are either like, oh, well, that's spiritual and I have a problem with it. Or, oh, well, it's a bastardization of what yoga really is supposed to be. And so like but you just kind of notice these negative thoughts and negative feelings you have about something that in and of itself is something really beneficial and powerful and positive. But then people kind of get these little like mental hiccups almost, that you get kind of trapped in thinking of something a certain way and just not even being aware that like, well, yoga isn't intrinsically spiritual or intrinsically, a bastardization of how it began in the beginning, and you just kind of let it be what it is and experience for what it is without all of your kind of expectations or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, the thing that has helped me the most about yoga is noticing energies, and that might sound really esoteric, it might sound really spiritual, but I just think of energy in terms of emotion is just energy in motion. So the way that I view it is that if someone's angry, that's a lot of intense emotion that is coming out. And I try to like pull away the layers of like what is creating that anger. And I know that if I'm angry back, it creates literally this like wall, this like energetic wall, because when two people are angry, they can't really hear what the other person is saying. It's like they just want to be heard, and they want to feel understood. And I'm not trying to make generalizations about it, but I realize that there's a lot of pain behind anger. Like anger is this manifestation of a lot of repressed things. And so before yoga, I used to think that like anger had to be fought with anger. Like, I mean, I think that's how wars are derived. I think that's like how a lot of misunderstanding happens. Yeah. And I just know that when I see anger, it makes me angry. But like I had to do the counterintuitive thing of being like, that person and that energy doesn't need to be met with that anger. That person actually just needs a platform to be heard. So I like sit back and let them have their expression. And I don't mean to like project like how I process, but like sometimes when I'm really angry, whether it be about anything, I have the people closest to me that understand that half of my process is just letting myself say whatever is making me angry. And then it's almost like the words come out into the ether and I like watch them and I'm like, it's really not that. Like, I thought it was that thing, but it's, like, a lot deeper. It's mostly that I just need to feel like I'm in a team or I'm connected to something and I feel very disconnected and I'm frustrated. But it allows me to kind of have my own self-soothing mechanism that, like, if I'm angry and I say it and then someone meets me with that anger of their own stuff, then I get angry at them for not, like, letting me have my space to deal with it in my own way. So it's like, that's why I think a lot of miscommunication happens. I mean, I think a lot about it because I'm married. There's a lot of central themes with that too. But then that's also very much in yoga. So, like, really observing the students and why they come and letting them have their space to deal with things the way that they know how and not condemning them for it. Because, like, we're human. We're all human. And we have that past regression of programming of, like, maybe we're used to feeling guilt first and then we feel sadness and then we let that go. And, like, while someone's in their guilt or their sadness phase, I shouldn't be like, oh, well, you shouldn't feel that. You should feel happy. Yoga is here to make you happy. Let's all be happy. Like, forget about that. Like, no, it's about, like, meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
And I think that yoga can oftentimes be misinterpreted as, like, having to have the most zen-ness or, like, the best body prototype or like yoga instructors have to be so well put together, and, like, half the time I'm not. And, like, I used to beat myself up about it and be like, oh my God, I'm a yoga instructor and I'm angry about something. Like, I can't be angry. Like, people will see me and they'll be like, she's not a good yoga instructor. And then I learned, like, I have to deal with it my own way. And when I come to class, I'm merely holding space for people. And so if they see me outside of my class and I'm not well put together, like, they might have an expectation, but I can't control that expectation. So I just have to know when I'm in class, I'm offering a service. When I'm outside of my classroom, I want to uphold that. Like, I still want to have that same mentality, but I'm not always going to. So I just like, I think it's leveling with yourself too. That you have to take that same compassion you have towards other people and apply it to yourself.
Oh, I think that is a huge theme across, we could talk about, people wanting to learn something new, like yoga, or trying to lose weight or get healthy. This idea of self-compassion just comes up over and over and over again. And unfortunately, be it nature or nurture, I don't really know, there's a huge lack of self-compassion, I think. I mean, at least among, myself, the people that I know, my friends, there tends to always be, like, that inner critic voice is the strongest voice. And then everything ends up being about, like, how do I, gain control over that critical voice? How do I stop being so hard on myself? So I think it's really interesting that, this idea of yoga and, just, I think, like, emotional awareness that comes from that practice that really lets you notice that negative self-talk or those, like, self-critical feelings, like you said, as well as the critical feelings we have about other people, just, like, helps us bring our awareness to that. And, I think so much of it just comes down to not letting those, like, really strong emotional reactions get the best of us, whether that's anger at someone else or anger at ourselves or disappointment at ourselves or whatever. And that could probably be, like, a whole topic of a podcast is just like how you deal with those painful emotions, because it's a part of everyone's lives. And, like you were saying, even for a yoga teacher, it's maybe kind of expected to always be really zen and they're just, like, living in an eternal namaste and they never get stressed out and they never get upset about anything. I mean, that's just not realistic.
Yeah, and I think it's also perpetuating this, like, keeping up with the Joneses in its own yoga way. Like, I think of, like, a vessel of, like, because I think of, like, Zen masters and sometimes I view them as just this white column of just energy flows right through them. Like, they don't hold on or latch on to anything, because that's one of the pillars of yoga is, like, not having attachment. And, like, in society, like, that sounds great, but we're all kind of attached to something, whether it be this idea of having to be polite or having to be positive or perfect. Like, those are attachments to ideas, not physical, tangible things. So when I think of this yoga master and that there's this level of passivity, it triggers something inside of me too. Like, I don't want to live my life in a very passive way because I think there's strength and intention. So I sometimes like give myself the benefit of the doubt that every person that exists on this earth is human. And so whether the yoga master decides to live their life of intention of mindfulness or of being present in the moment, I think that means that energy can't just pass through them because they have to harness it in a way to be present. Right. Does that make sense? Like, I do believe that they are just redirecting energy. And so I just try to think of myself that it creates this really vicious, ugly cycle of being mad when I'm mad or being sad when I'm sad. So instead of like feeling like I'm just passive and I don't care about anything, I think, okay, I'm upset now about something, obviously, because I'm not feeling fulfilled, or I'm not feeling like I can breathe easily. Then I allow myself to feel that way. Right. Instead of being like, okay, no, I have to do it. I have to pull it all together. Like, I just allow myself to be like, okay, I'm not feeling the best. And that gives me kind of this like check-in of a compass of being like, okay, well, I can navigate towards that, but I don't have to do that right now. Because if I had the sense of urgency to have to do it right now, then that would mean that I'd have to get out of the present moment and shift towards something and ignore what I was feeling in the moment. Yeah. So I really do that. And then I'm also like really into this show, The Good Place, and it features Kristen Bell, and it's about just kind of like the afterlife, and it paints this really wonderful visual, and it's like the good place is the afterlife. And she says something about anytime that I listen to that like consciousness of like I should or shouldn't, I just try to do the thing that wouldn't make the loudest noise. So like the consciousness, I think all of us have a level of consciousness of knowing what's right and wrong. And she like talks about how I try to do good because when I do good, that inner critic of like feeling regret isn't as loud. And so it's like that's a self-invested thing. But like when you're talking about that voice of the critic, like whenever the critic starts talking about I should have done something differently, when I know that the path that I took was good and wholesome in that moment, I just am like, thank you so much for your opinion. And I just really try not to like feed into it, because the moment that I feed into it, it's like it kind of runs away. So I think about voices a lot too in the head, and like how do I silence the one that is regretful, and then how do I silence the one that is critical, but I still let them have their time, or else it could get really loud.
Well, and I think it kind of brings up a kind of critical issue, which is, I guess you could call it avoidance or coping mechanisms, So for most people, or hopefully not most people, but, like we all have these, wide range of emotions. And I think that some people, when those like painful or scary emotions come up, it's like an attitude of avoidance. I'm going to just ignore it and pretend like it doesn't exist. Or an attitude of I'm going to use this coping mechanism like alcohol or drugs or shopping or whatever. You can kind of like there's a lot of different ways that I think people just, work to like dig a giant hole and shove all the emotions inside rather than, like giving a place for those emotions to exist. And like you were kind of saying, like you acknowledge that it's there, you acknowledge that emotion, and then you forgive yourself for feeling it in the first place. But rather than having this, like I really kind of think a lot about like the digging a giant hole and putting emotions inside thing, because I see a lot of my friends, will kind of do stuff like that, and they'll because painful things happen and traumatic things happen to us, and that's just kind of a part of our lives, and amazing things happen too. But I think that having a way of I guess you could call like a healthy coping mechanism for dealing with those really human emotions and that pain and that grief that is inevitable at some point in our lives. And I kind of feel like that's what yoga lets us do. It lets us sit in a place where we can be really present with all the emotions that we're feeling, but then in a really, like a powerful way. Like, at least for me, I feel like I have more control and more power to be able to say, like, I'm not going to let this feeling of anger, like, wrap me up and, like, take over my day. Or if there's something that somebody's done or said, and certainly on YouTube, like, there's definitely enough, like, mean comments that have been said over the years, and I just try to, like, feel the emotion that I feel from that person's comment, but then know that, kind of what you alluded to earlier, like, that anger or criticalness coming from that perfect stranger on YouTube, like, that's coming from a place of their own pain, that, like, they would say something mean to a perfect stranger on the internet, to try and, like, harm them or make them stop what they're doing. So, just being able to be really present with the emotions, not ignore them, but then also not let them, like, carry you away like a big wave, and then, like, your whole day is just being stuck in this, like, I'm, whatever mean thing that they said about me. And I think, we always hear that thing, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. But words really can hurt us, And I think that being in a place where you can, just observe those different things and observe those emotions and not judge those emotions or feel like, oh, now I'm a bad person for feeling hurt, or I'm a bad person for feeling, anger. You just kind of, like, accept that emotion for what it is, and then find a way to, like, hey, how can I, like, move my energy somewhere else and focus on something that makes me happy? Or, thinking about something that you're grateful for, I think, is a great, like, little trick for myself to, like, get out of that kind of, like, mudslide of hurtful emotions and try to, rather than just being like, oh, I'm going to just force myself to be happy, or I'm going to just pretend to be happy, I'm going to try to think about something that brings happiness to me and, like, flood out the bad emotions with the good ones.
Yeah, so I 100% agree, and I think that it is really hard, and I think that's why I view space, I think, very differently than most people, and that in itself is a generalization, but I view that energy has to come through the body, and it has to be outletted in a physical form. So that's why I really advocate and love yoga. Yoga does not mean you have to come to a yoga studio on a yoga mat. Yoga can be you going for a walk and doing that practice that you just did of being like, okay, what that person did that made me feel this way says more about that person, and those words do hurt me, and they hurt me because there's something about what they said that really triggers something inside myself. And being able to kind of walk and multitask and do that thing. So, like, yoga doesn't have to be on a mat. It can be anywhere that you really have these internal dialogues that are beneficial to you. But then that also activates a really interesting point, too, that people process things differently. Yeah. And so that's why I'm a huge supporter and advocate towards getting, like, a space for therapy in the sense of counseling, because I go see a counselor all the time. Whenever I feel like there's a lot that I just need someone to hold space for me, I go and I just kind of talk about what's on my surface level part of my mind. So the way that I view therapy is like kind of like a nice deep sleep. So when you aren't getting good rest, like you can't think clearly and you aren't able to problem solve and have the capacity. So like for me, like going to therapy is like a reset button of me just like getting out all of these negative things, and then like I said before, like watching the words and being like, how do I really feel? Okay, maybe that's not it. And like doing my own process. And so it's like some people need more space and the thought, and that's why like good friendships, it's like you are kind of the summation of all these people that you surround yourself with. And for a long time in my life, especially in my 20s, I did not know how to be a good friend, and I didn't know how to hold space. And the reason is because I felt that there were so many people in my life that didn't know how to hold space for me. Like every time I would say, oh, I feel this certain way, people would say, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. Like you should feel this way, or you think too much, or blah, blah, blah. And then I just realized that is their experience. That doesn't have to be my experience. And I really cherish my thoughts because my thoughts are opportunity for growth. And they're also like this own internal diary that's continually happening. So when I go to see a therapist and just like say, this is what I'm dealing with, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, it just, everything kind of opens up. I feel very much like Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where he's just like moving things like in this like digital world. And that's like what we do online too. But like, I'm able to kind of like emotionally and think data dump there. And then in yoga, it's the same thing, but we're dispersing the energy through movement. So it's like, at least having a balance of where you need space is really important for the human condition. So it's like, I used to think that my husband had to be the place that all of that had to be like offloaded to. Like he had to be my therapist. He had to be my best friend. He had to be the person that would want to come to yoga with me. And now I'm just like, no, he has his life. He can be who he is. I used to think my friends had to be those things. And don't place those expectations unless they open those up to you, right? Like if a friend is like, Karina, how have you been? Like, tell me. And then you're like, oh man, I can really feel comfortable and safe to do this, then that's great. But don't feel forced like you have to, I just like to tell people that they have the power to like find these spaces for them that can help them live their best life, because it can feel really isolating in either space if you're like, oh, I'm going to yoga every day and I feel good, but then afterwards I'm just like, there's still like this residual thing that I need to get off my chest and I don't know what it is. Well, then by golly, like do the health, like pair everything together that work well. Like maybe that is to go and do a talk therapy. Maybe it is to like do something creative with your hands. Maybe it is like eating healthier and like supplementing some vitamins that you might be deficient of. Right. Like there's all these things that like, you have access to that you can kind of like feel the infantry of force for yourself. And that's why I think that like, it's not just one thing, Right. And I like love all the things that you were talking about too, because I feel it a lot. Like it's a lot of things that I have to manage, but I know it's in like my best interest, and all those things I don't feel regret doing. Right. So then I'll do them. Right. Yeah.
I think that there's definitely, a lot to be said about getting our emotions out of us, and letting, it goes back to like the digging a giant hole in the mud and putting everything in there versus being like, okay, I'm going to lay out these emotions and talk about them and give my awareness to them. And you're so right. Once you kind of bring your awareness to something or a way that you're feeling or a grudge you've been holding or whatever it is, just by like shining some light on it, the light of your awareness, just shine a little light on it, and you can either see, how you could change that emotion, or how like, oh, maybe my own assumption about what that person might have meant by making that comment. Now I've like created all of this
world.
Yeah, all of this like feeling about like assuming that they were implying this about me or whatever. And you just kind of realize like, okay, wait a second. I just made all that up in my head. And even if they did say something that was mean or hurtful, you still, just by like bringing some light to it and some light to the emotional response that you got from it, gives you so much power to be able to either, like they say in yoga all the time, like let go of the things that aren't serving you. You notice those emotions or those feelings or those little internal habits that you have, and you start like, okay, well, I'm going to make a mental intention and decision to like not let that stuff bother me anymore, or forgive myself for being really hurt by the way that this person treated me, but then also make a decision to like step out of that place and just live my life and not let all of that pain dictate like every thought that I have about myself and everything that I do.
Yeah, I think that you you illustrated and put that like very clear, and I agree so much. And then there's, to me, like as you were demonstrating that, I almost feel like you can like place your emotions down as like trading cards, you know?
Yeah.
And then like when you see one, like for me, I mean, to get more specific of like me and my background, I was watching this really interesting video about like when people share their stories, it's a very vulnerable space because the worst critic is yourself. And then B, once you start doing that, people can say, oh my gosh, that's like a little bit of my story. And there's like that connection. And also it's just a very neat thing to witness. Like you can't even really put it into words. But like for me, I think I've dealt with a lot of abandonment and commitment issues because I'm not saying or using it as an excuse, but my storyline is that I was adopted when I was 18 months. And I was raised by a very, very nurturing, loving, caring, very, like, wanted to support me in every way possible family. So I like, really love that. But with that support came, I almost felt like strings of expectation. Like, we were going back in, like, the college and having kids and getting married and all that stuff. And so, for me, that card of, like, commitment and abandonment tends to be laying, like, face down a lot. And I'm like, I'm not really thinking so much about it, but sometimes it'll flip over and I will feel very much like in this general place where I'll blanket that the world is bad and people's intent are bad and I will have lost all hope for humanity, you know?
Yeah.
And I will see that. And what used to cause me so much pain and angst was thinking that I could not fix that, or that I had to have excuses, or that like I had to find a victim and a valor, or a victim and a villain in every situation. And now I've like learned that like, okay, it's okay. Like it's almost reconciling your like infantile self to being like, it's okay to feel that way. And I'm sure like everybody feels at some time in their life lost, or they don't have the answers, and a little bit discouraged by that. And so I like allow that card to be what it is. And so when it rears its ugly face, as I like to refer it, I like try not to think of it as ugly. And I'm just like, that's what I'm going through right now. And what helps and alleviates that is like the talking about it. And that's really counterintuitive, because a lot of times, like Brene talks about, we want to almost hoard our shame because we think that that will somehow make us stronger. But really what makes us stronger is talking about and being like, I'm not perfect. There are times when I'm like, oh man, I'm feeling low. And that's like what helps the collective, I think, grow and expand. Because if you just keep your experiences and your judgments of yourself and others to yourself, then there's no room for anybody to come in and say, you know, I feel that way too. And then this is what helped me. And how about you maybe like shift this perspective? And then it becomes like this live, moving, mobile thing, instead of like, this is my world, this is my reality, I don't want anybody in. And I feel that opening up is painful, you know? So like those are just some lessons that I learned. So I really like the illustration of the light on things and letting them be what they are.
Yeah. And I love your little analogy of like our emotions and our experiences are like we're playing a game of war or whatever, right? Yeah. And like all the cards are, you know, over the course of our life, sometimes like these cards are face up and really prominent. And then sometimes like this like really sad or traumatic thing that happened maybe a long time ago, or maybe we haven't even thought about it in a long time. And all of a sudden that card just flips. And like that is the thing that is it like puts a filter over everything else you see. And maybe it's like some of those emotions are they're yellow and they're happy and everything's great. And then sometimes it's like the big dark gray filter gets turned over. And like learning tools and methods for moving through those times and, you know, kind of building our toolbox, you could say, of, you know, whether it's doing yoga or going for a run or just, you know, doing deep breathing or meditating or whatever, that we like recognize that, sometimes those cards of sad emotions get turned over, but it's totally okay. And now I have, you know, a little toolbox of things I can use to help me like start flipping over the positive cards again and like start seeing things with like the pink colored glasses again rather than the gray ones.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's also just being able to recognize that happens. And what helped me a lot in my path of just self-help, as silly and like blanket as that is, I realize that things are temporary. Like even the most blissful, euphoric feelings, like those are temporary because something will knock me into something else, into another realm. And then the deep, dark despair realms, those are temporary too. Yeah. And I think that really helped me because it almost felt like when I was in my euphoric space that I wanted it to last forever. And then when I was in my deep, dark despair space, like the more I fought it, the more it would like continue, and I would feel suffocated by it, like almost like, how come I can't get to that euphoric place, because that's where I want to be forever, and I'm stuck down here in this deep dark dwelling, and it's embarrassing, and it's I'm ashamed of it, and it's ugly, and I feel that people can tell and sense and know that I don't have it together. And the more that I would just like unravel on myself, I would just like be in it. And so I also had to like teach myself to do the counterintuitive thing, which is like to get out, to change my scenery, to go talk to somebody, to do the thing that seems like, oh my gosh, that's like the last thing I want to do. I like realized that if I did it, that little critic inside my mind would like dissipate like the moment I started. But it takes so much energy and effort to just start it. Like, I mean, because I can fold in on myself and like on my thoughts so easily, and so just to like be like, those are valid thoughts, and I don't have to shove them down, but I also don't have to deal with them all right now. Like, let me prioritize them, and then let me go and do something that's like beneficial to me, because then I will come back with the level head and be like, those things that were really bothering me, they're not so big. They're not so big and ugly and hairy and scary, and they're just there. So, yeah, I mean, like, what I love about this conversation, it's like we like went continents into like all these directions, and it just all comes back to like, yoga doesn't have to be your thing or my thing or anyone's thing, but it just, at least I want the missions of the ideas of why they exist to like kind of ruminate with people, which is like giving yourself space of whatever it is that you need to process. And if you like to process however you like to, then that's great, but just, I want people to just have space for themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And definitely one of our, kind of guiding principles with Psyche Truth and Wellness Plus is like help people see that there's this huge fountain of beauty and positivity and like wonderful things we can do to help ourselves feel better. So maybe it's yoga, maybe it's working out or meditation or getting healthy. But I just try to always, remember that, everyone's different, and for some people it could be, martial arts, swimming, diving. I mean, there's just this really endless list of things that could like potentially be your thing that helps you feel better. But just to remind people that, hey, there are things out there that can help you feel better, and empowering them to be able to look and see that potential for feeling better or potential for living a better life and feeling really content, and then maybe helping to like guide them to find that thing or whatever.
And it was exactly like the thing that you said earlier of just like, no matter what anybody does that's new, it's like there's this book that talks about like art and fear, and it talks about how when artists begin stuff, maybe they're replicating something that has already been done. They're like using a prototype or a template of somebody else. But by copying, which is gotten such an ugly coin term, that they realize what they want. And then they can kind of create their own path. And so like yoga, and it doesn't have to be yoga, it's like what you were saying, they have options, and it doesn't have to be the same as yours. It doesn't have to be the same as mine. Right. But just in the art of like kind of weaving it into their life, they can hopefully find something that works for them and be like, that really worked for me, or no, that didn't work for me, but now they know. And so like that's, I think, really powerful.
Definitely. Well, Julia, I'm just so
gosh.
appreciative of you coming in today and sharing this time with us.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to do some podcasts. We can talk about so many different things. All of this emotional, dealing with emotions stuff was like very poignant for me right now. So, yeah, I just want to thank you so much for being here, and I'm so excited to continue our conversation.
Yes, thank you so much, Karina.
And I want to thank all of you patrons for supporting us, literally making it possible for us to keep doing what we love. We are eternally grateful, and I really hope that you will join us in the rest of our videos. Thank you so much, and have a great day.